ToeJam and Earl is a series, I think. Honestly, I'd barely heard of this series before. I knew the name since I'd heard it in Sega circles before, but outside of that, nothing. The only way I knew it was revived was through the existence of an official Twitter account. Now, normally I wouldn't bring up something like this since it isn't particularly relevant when it comes to game revivals. Like, obviously they're gonna try to use social media to promote their product. Gotta take up as much space in people's cranium as possible as they doom scroll away their free time. However, the ToeJam and Earl Twitter is something else. I don't know how many people actually remember this, but a few years ago, this Twitter earned a reputation by being as out of character as a brand Twitter can possibly be. It was genuinely unhinged, and that's not an exaggeration. They would tweet the usual promotional stuff that you would expect, and then out of the blue, you would just see furry fanfiction just on the timeline for everyone to see. It was a crazy time. The most infamous tweet of the bunch was this one, and needless to say, it was later deleted. But honestly, I miss this era of the account. Sure, nowadays it's still a pseudo-personal account disguise, which is funny in its own right, but the chaotic charm has definitely been lessened. Now, why would I sidetrack this video to talk about the Twitter account? Because of course I would. I was not about to leave that unmentioned, but also because the point I was trying to make is that it did make me aware that this game existed, despite everything else. So I guess the advertising worked. What is a ToeJam and Earl game like? Well, I wanted to understand what I was getting into, so I decided to do a quick peek at the original game. It absolutely oozes the 90s. The shades, the backwards cap, the vomit-inducing bright patterns of the background. There was no other decade this could have been produced in. It radiates that radical 90s energy, yeah! That being said, much like nuclear energy, overexposure poses a great threat to one's health, so I will skip the intro and just get to the gameplay. The goal of the game is very simple. You have crash landed on Earth and you have to retrieve your missing ship parts so you can escape. Sounds familiar. The gameplay loop is pretty straightforward, all things considered. It is a 4x4 exploration game. Each floor is fairly spacious and requires a lot of aimless wandering in order to find the next teleporter. Thankfully, there's a map you can pull up, so getting lost isn't too much of an issue. The game will tell you if there's a ship piece on the current floor, which will require much more exploration in order to reach. But otherwise, the goal is to locate the elevator and get the heck out of there in order to hopefully get another ship piece. This is all well and good, but there has to be more to do in each area in order to make going through all of this worth it, right? Well, the main appeal of the game is the present mechanic. Well, as it turns out, Earthlings are actually horrible, disgusting monsters who program some of the most irritating enemies you'll ever face. Whether it be a group of bees, a devil, or a hamster in a ball, they will hunt you down, so you need to defend yourself. How? Well, there are these roads that appear sometimes that allow you to walk faster, but they're nowhere near good enough. We need a force mightier than gods in order to quell these vermin. We need the most powerful weapon ever devised. The presents. Each one you pick up is actually an item you can use, which can either heal you, give you a power up, and just to mess with the player, some of them can hinder your movement or spawn enemy just to add some extra excitement for your playthrough. Using these presents isn't exactly as straightforward as it might seem. The wide majority of them are unidentified, meaning it's a complete shot in the dark of what's going to happen. When you're in the heat of the moment, you need to make a decision. Do you run for your life and likely get hit by another foe, or do you test your luck and see if fate's in your hands? So you panic. Oh god, oh god, oh god. And out of options, you click the use button, convinced that you're already dead, but with the blind optimism of a hero player. Phew. You can also get some extra assistance with a few friendly Earthlings in this game if you give them money, which can heal you or defeat enemies. I didn't really get any use out of these since having to hunt them down can sometimes be more dangerous than just running for the goal, but I suppose they can be useful in harder floors of the game. Overall, the gameplay of this game was pretty alright. It's not quite a super action-filled experience like a Sonic or an Hour. It's more of a comfort kind of game, something you play while vibing to a podcast or the incredible 90s funk of the soundtrack. Seriously, this is some good Genesis goodness. The vibe of this game is also carried over into the humor. It has that 90s sarcastic energy you would expect. I'm a bit mixed on it personally. On one hand, it is very childish in a dumb way, like how you can see ToeJam's butt when he crouches. But on the other hand, there are some things I find really funny, like how if you go idle then the game will literally yell at you. Get out of bed! The original ToeJam and Earl isn't quite my thing, but I can respect it for what it is. Now that I've gone that whole tangent out of the way, let's talk about Back in the Groove. Being led by the person who created the original ToeJam and Earl, which is pretty based, this game still retains the structure of the original. Same level by level roguelike gameplay, same presence, same 90s aesthetic. So what is new about this new one? Well, the humor of the game has been improved in my opinion. Sure, you still have the very childish 90s stuff, which I'm not a fan of, and the root beer present that still makes you burp, which is just as annoying as ever. That being said, it is nowhere near as grating as the noises the enemies make. This game did have moments that I thought were genuinely funny, like a present that spawns a giant "I'm here" sign for the enemies to notice you more. Or when you pick up a dollar, the game has the exact same reaction I have when I get a new paycheck. Money! Unlike the original Genesis game, the levels are littered with trees, bushes, and houses which you can shake, which is an improvement since it adds more things to interact with in the level, as well as being a source for getting presents. It also doubles as an opportunity for the game to try to drop a bowling ball on your head. Haha, you missed! Something tells me that wasn't intended. Shaking the trees can also spawn a parking meter, which acts as a Korok-style puzzle of chasing them down. And when it's done, it'll either give you money, spawn an enemy, or open up a warp zone to the Hyper Funk Zone, which is a nice minigame distraction from the main game that requires you to dodge obstacles in order to gain XP. It is way more fun than I'd like to admit, and it makes going after the parking meter worth it on its own. But that's kind of sidetracking for the main improvements of the game. For example, now there are a total of 9 playable characters, upgrading from the 6 in the previous game. Every character and enemy are animated with an excessive amount of motion tweening, which looks kind of odd, but I suppose it fits the general hand-drawn art style, but I felt like it was worth mentioning. The enemies and allies have been heavily expanded upon as well. There are now 60 enemies in the game, which sounds like an impressive number on paper, but a majority of the enemies still behave pretty much the same as the original game, and will very easily gang up on you if you aren't careful, so it's best just to stay as far away as possible. I guess the majority of the new enemies just serve to be some kind of visual parody, whether it be phone bad.
The self-run radiation does cause brain tumors.
I will say one aspect that I actually really enjoyed was how the difficulty scales with the amount of floors you clear. For example, you begin to find evil versions of the mailbox and the teleporter, which requires you to pay more attention to your surroundings, otherwise you'll take massive damage, or in the case of the teleporter, you'll be sent one floor downwards. It genuinely caught me off guard, and I appreciated how clever it was. The game does give you more options to dodge enemies, thankfully, with the sunflower serving as a way to get enemies to stop chasing you, and the road system from the original returning. I would still say that dodging an enemy chasing you is still borderline impossible unless you get an upgrade. Like, seriously, I am trying absolutely anything to avoid these guys and I'm still get hit. It's garbage. Come on! Speaking of upgrades, there are now significantly more allies of varying usefulness. The worst of these are the ones that just heal you for a certain amount of money, since this game has multiple presents that are just food, and there is a sushi making ally that just gives you food as a present slot, so naturally they become essentially useless. Anyway, Gandhi's in this game. Yeah, not a joke. He creates a circle of healing wherever he goes, which is pretty based. Unfortunately, I can't say he is super useful since he acts on his own accord and ends up being stuck in one section of the map, typically not where he would be useful. Now, as far as the good NPCs go, the Wise Men is one that's been in the series since the first game and will upgrade you once you get enough XP, allowing you to have more health, move faster, and just generally make the game actually playable past 410. But honestly, I didn't care for any other one except for the dancing minigame one, since it's a fun distraction and gets you XP and money for free. The rest can be useful, like the opera singer that defeats enemies. Besides that, the wide majority of these won't help you too much. Overall, Back in the Groove is a welcoming update to the original game's formula, but it is still not my thing. Walking around can still be quite tedious, and having to go through several floors without a ship hurt is really annoying, and also time consuming. Even with the present mechanic and plenty of enemies at your disposal, you'll take so much damage that you'll never want to get close to enemies given the choice. And I know you're supposed to get a ton of XP by exploring in order to level up, in order to keep up with the scaling difficulty. But unfortunately, I just don't find the exploration in this game to be very fulfilling long term, since it really does feel like busy work most of the time. You pretty much have to force yourself to use presents very often in order to keep things fresh. And I find myself not doing this since most of the time I don't know what they are, and there is a very real chance that I'll get a bad present, one that just puts me in more danger than I was before. So what ends up happening is that you'll just keep playing very samey levels over and over again, with not much gameplay variety aside from it maybe being snow occasionally. Then you finally get a floor for ship part very slowly. I had a run where I went for well over an hour, and I'd made it to floor 17 with 4 ship parts, only to accidentally use a present that killed me, leading to a game over and all my progress being for nothing. That was on me, but that was an hour and 17 minutes of progress, and to be honest, I didn't particularly achieve much in that time. The simplicity of the original game is pretty excusable for the time, but with this game, I don't know. It just leaves me kind of bored, even with all the charm on display. As a result, I don't really feel motivated to play this for hours on end, just to see whatever ending cutscene the reward would be. I do think this game is fun and has a place in the roguelike genre, but I don't think it has enough mechanical depth to find myself playing it for a particularly long time. Although you do have to take into account that this is the Switch version, I mean there's gonna be plenty of frame drops. The game seems about as interested in running as I am in playing it. I do understand the appeal of this game at the very least, but I find this one kind of hard to recommend, unless you're already a fan of this genre. Although this game does go on sale fairly often, so honestly, you know what, despite what I've said, get it on sale if you're interested, since this isn't bad for a couple of hours, even if it didn't fully click with me. With that being said, as a revival for ToeJam and Earl, it does the job much better than the majority of the games I've covered. Yeah, I should have expected that.
Alright, it's time to check out how you did today. Now let's take a look. Class B license. Decided to play it safe, huh? Come back next time and show us your best.